listeners. Welcome back to the Shine Within podcast. I want to go ahead and welcome Jaclyn Downs. She stands at the forefront of functional nutrigenomics, offering a fresh perspective on fertility challenges. As the esteemed author of Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine, using nutrigenomics to solve unexplained infertility, she dives deep into the genomic interpretation and pairs it with functional lab tests. Through a meticulous intake consultation, Jaclyn collaborates with healthcare practitioners and clients alike in navigating through perplexing health roadblocks to address the fundamental causes of inflammation and imbalance. Thank you so much for coming on my show today, Jaclyn.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so could you just briefly describe the main thesis of your book, Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine, and how you became interested in the connection between functional medicine and fertility?
Okay, so the premise of the book is that it addresses very common, but lesser known causes of inflammation. And a lot of times the current MO with fertility is to just force hormones into a specific range. But like, for instance, assisted reproductive technologies only have maybe 20 or 30% success rate because they're not addressing the root cause of why the body feels that now is not a good or optimal or safe time to procreate. The hormones are just the messengers. So my book dives really deep into things that can cause the hormones to be out of balance or the body to temporarily halt mating ability.
Yes,
And
and oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, in one of your chapters, delves into the lesser known factors of inflammation and oxidative stress at the cellular level. Can you explain the importance of that connection?
Yes. So even though my book is tailored towards the fertility community with motivated people trying to get pregnant or sustain a pregnancy, and also practitioners, because I have a lot of technical stuff in the appendices, it really could help for any chronic condition, because inflammation is what is associated with oxidative stress, and that is damage to the cell. That's damage to the cell's structure and also damage to the cell's information and all the parts of the cell. And so that is the root cause of all chronic inflammatory conditions that we see today that most people are having challenges with or taking medication for. And so fertility is not an exemption. So when our body is inflamed, or when our body has an unwelcome guest, whether it's a toxin or some sort of pathogen, or just all kinds of stressors from whatever stressors we have, the plethora of them, it's going to switch. It's going to inherently know that now is not a safe time to create a baby. Whether if we don't have enough energy for our cells to do their daily jobs, then our body inherently knows that now's not a good time because we don't have enough energy for ourselves. How are we going to have energy to grow a human being that's super complex? Right. So the book just looks at a bunch of, I'd say like I have about 12 or 13 or 14 chapters that discuss various things that cause that inflammation and oxidative stress.
Yes, and we were just talking before about mold and the mycotoxins, and because those aren't typically the things that come to mind when you're thinking about having a baby and discussing fertility. What's the relevance in your research? What did you find?
So mold emits toxins called mycotoxins as a way to stake its territory. And that's why mold indoors is so much more problematic than mold that you find outdoors, because mold indoors feels threatened, so it's going to kick out more mycotoxins. And these toxins are very, very toxic to us and to animals. And not all mold is toxic, but there is a lot of toxic mold. And there is study after study after study. If you want to go to Google Scholar, it's just scholar.google, you can type in mold and X, whatever condition. And fertility, infertility, miscarriage, there are studies. And so the really important thing is, first off, if you are lucky enough to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy, studies do show that we pass the mycotoxins on to our children in utero and through breast milk. It absolutely passes through breast milk. And so, and it's not just the mycotoxins, it's all kinds of toxins. There's a really great talk that was done. It was a study done by the Environmental Working Group. It's a pretty famous study. It was called 10 Americans, and they took the cord blood of 10 brand new babies, first breath, and they tested it, and they found an average of, I think it was about 289 different chemicals, including flame retardants and Teflon. And so all of these things, we accumulate a lifetime of toxins, and then we pass them on to our babies, and our babies are born with a lot of these toxins. And so I really, really have a wild passion for helping women to prepare their bodies for pregnancy well before a problem even arises, so that you can optimize your toxin load and optimize your detoxification pathways, but also optimize your nutrients, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so you want to make sure, especially in that first trimester when you don't want to eat anything but bread and crackers, that you have the nutrient stores to pass on to your baby.
That's right. Because these are things that we don't even think about, getting pregnant. We're just like, oh, I'm eating healthy and everything, but that may be the case. There may be some outside factors as well. Is there any other findings or insights that you particularly found that surprised you or even alarmed you?
The mold is tied to histamine intolerance, but histamine intolerance, we need histamine. Histamine plays a very, very important part in conception and also pregnancy. And it's that Goldilocks zone. You don't want too much, but you need to have enough. But most people currently have histamine, a bucket that's like overflowing to some degree. And a lot of people think, well, I don't have hay fever, I don't have allergies, I don't have a histamine issue. But histamine can manifest in many, many more ways than just your garden variety hay fever, seasonal allergies. And histamine and estrogen can feed each other. So if you are estrogen dominant, like if you have PMS, if you have sore breasts, if you have a big symptom is if you feel worse around ovulation, because that's when your estrogen is highest. So if you're getting nausea, if you're getting vomiting, if you're having any other kind of symptoms as far as circadian rhythm, digestive upset, that can be an indicator that histamine may be a problem, and that's something that you should look into. And part of my exploration with my clients is through genetics. The software that I use has a lot of the histamine genes mapped out, so we can see how your histamine receptors are working. That's like the keyhole on the cell, or how your histamine is degrading. And so if you notice that you feel better on antihistamines, that may be a clue. But I don't recommend long-term antihistamine use, because those work on your histamine receptors. So they basically just close the receptors so that the histamine can't get in there. So it doesn't actually make the histamine less in the body. It doesn't lower the bucket level. It just shuffles it around. But we have certain enzymes that are produced by our body that we can see looking at your genes, how well they're produced. And if you have genetic variants there, you might not be producing those histamine degrading enzymes very well. And so your histamine bucket can fill up and overflow a lot more, and that can affect your hormones and therefore your fertility.
Wow, you know your stuff. I'm like, this is the education for Gina and of course the audience, because this is like really good. I love this. I definitely love this. Now, you've also dedicated a chapter on physical and emotional health. How does this intertwine with the more scientific aspects of your book?
Our body it's a holistic body, right? We are our physical and spiritual and mental and emotional all rolled into one. And so your emotions definitely, and your mindset can play a really big part in your fertility, especially if you've been on a fertility journey for a really long time, or even or had a single miscarriage. Something in the back of your mind might think, oh, my body's broken, or my body can't do this, or it's never going to happen. And so then that is that subconscious loop that is sort of pushing the possibility away. Also, you know, childhood traumas or sexual abuse, you've got a lot of energy locked up in those areas of your body. And so doing things to tune into that and try and clear that energy can absolutely be a beneficial piece of the puzzle to identify.
Yes, absolutely. And then you also mentioned in the chapter like full actionable steps. Could you actually highlight a few key physical health steps that readers can then just begin with?
Mindful breathing, it's free and it doesn't take too long. It could even just take not even a whole, you know, maybe a minute of your day. It start as basic as you want, but just tuning into your breath, feeling your breath moving in, feeling the oxygen moving into your body and down the back of your throat and just oxygenating your cells. And it doesn't have to be any, you know, 4-7-8 breath or box breath or ujjayi breath or anything like that, although those are techniques, but just breathing and coming in to be present with your body will help to calm your nervous system, because we have two branches of our nervous system. We have the fight or flight, and then we have the rest and digest, also rest, digest, repair, reproduce, also called feed and breed. And so doing some of these things like mindful breathing and walking outside on the ground in bare feet and getting sunshine and doing something as simple as an Epsom salt bath. All of these things are free or very inexpensive. And I mention a lot more in my book as well. And they can really help to calm your nervous system down and move it into a feed and breed, reproduce state. So when our nervous system is on fight or flight, fight, flight, or freeze, it's evolutionarily, you're looking like, you know, there's a predator chasing you. And so when you're using all your energy and you're stressing out and your cortisol is being pumped, your body is trying to deal with the stress, and it inherently knows it's not a good time to make a baby. And so it halts your mating ability. And so doing these just very simple techniques, and you can get, you know, really expensive tech gadgets, and you can go see specialists. And I'm a huge fan of craniosacral therapy, and I talk about that in my book. There's so many things that you can do to help calm your nervous system and shift it into the parasympathetic feed and breed state.
Ooh, can we talk a little bit about the cranial sacral and then the benefits of that?
Yes, yes. Have you ever gotten it done?
Oh, I'm a massage therapist also.
Right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
so I didn't really it was part of the course. This is many, many years ago, but I never really practiced it. It's just been my expertise is just deep tissue sports massage and relaxation and breathing and all that good stuff. But I would love for you to talk about that, because I am a true believer of that as well. But like I said, I never practiced it as much because, well, at the Four Seasons, we didn't offer that. We didn't offer that one. We should.
Okay, so we, from our cranium to our sacrum, which is like, you know, tip of our tailbone, there is basically a loop of our nervous system and energy, and physical injury, emotional injury, traumas can block up anywhere in that loop, and craniosacral therapy can feel where those blockages are. And it sounds really, really woo-woo, but I have the most amazing story that sold me. And so it's really, really gentle. Some of it's just like, no, I've only been to one practitioner, and she's amazing. And I just wish that like I could just clone her and everybody could have her for craniosacral therapy. So I don't really know what to compare her to, but she's mind-blowingly amazing. But sometimes it's just, she's laying there with her, I'm laying on the table and her arms are just underneath me. Or she just has her hands placed gently underneath my head. And I have fallen asleep on her table numerous times. I've cried on her table numerous times. And so I had cancer in 2020. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I was seeing her, and I had a mask on because, you know, COVID. And at the end of my session, she goes, "Have you ever had any root canals?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Have you ever had any major dental work?" And I said, "Well, I went to Mexico and I got a mercury filling removed, and it wasn't done by a biological dentist." And she goes, on the top left. And I was like, how did you know that? You have not looked inside my mouth. I had a mask on. She said, your immune system's reacting to it. I would get that checked out. And I said, oh, well, dentists have x-rayed my teeth before, and they've seen that the tooth is gray, and they never said anything about it. And she said, no, you need to get a cone beam scan, which is a 3D scan, and it looks up into your sinuses and down into your jawline. And so I was like, oh, they're not covered by insurance, but whatever, I'll pay the $300. And so the infection for that tooth was so bad that it ate through the bone to my sinus cavity. And that's why my left nostril was just like, it ran often, just this clear, constant running. And so that my immune system constantly reacting to that could have been one of a contributing factor to my immune system allowing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma to take up residence. And so that story is just absolutely amazing. And just the fact that I always feel very grounded and open and symmetrical when I get off the table, and just like so much more relaxed and completely in the parasympathetic rest digest state.
Oh, I love that. It's kind of like a Reiki as well. And she must be very intuitive too, to realize all these things. And I believe in all these gifts because I'm very intuitive as well. And because I'm learning more about my gifts and learning more and more and more. And that's why I just like, oh, I'm like into that wooey kind of phase right now. But I love that she was able to let you know, hey, you get this checked out just by touch. And like you said, you had your mask on and everything. That is amazing.
Yeah, she's pretty magical.
Yeah, she's all the way where you're at, huh? Not in California.
No, yeah, she's in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Darn.
Yeah.
Now, I was gonna also ask for your clients. Now, are there any like success stories or any testimonials that you'd like to also share about them?
My favorite one is the histamine one, because it's just nobody thinks about histamine affecting your hormones or your fertility. So one of my favorite clients ever, she came to me and her periods were kind of all a mess. And I mentioned her in the histamine chapter in my book because she's like my favorite testimonial of all time. And she had like a heartbreaking number of miscarriages. I think she had like 11 miscarriages.
Oh my goodness.
And so she came to me and we got her periods like perfect. She's like, my period is like, there's no symptoms at all. Like I didn't even know it was coming, and it was just perfect. And it was, and so that was great. And we looked at her genes, and I realized that she was very variated in her histamine genes, like especially there out of all of the other sections and topics that I look at. And I addressed some histamine, like a low histamine diet, and some histamine degrading enzymes and nutrients to support histamine degradation. And she got pregnant. So, and went on to have the baby, I guess I should say, because getting pregnant wasn't her issue. Staying pregnant was her issue. And just a fun fact is that sometimes, especially if women do have a lot of histamine, they might feel noticeably better in their pregnancy, during their pregnancy, because the placenta makes a lot of diamine oxidase, which is a histamine degrading enzyme. And so a lot of women that might have had allergies before or sensitivities to things might notice that they just feel more resilient and robust. And so it could be because the placenta is producing its own histamine degrading enzymes as well. It's that important that our bodies innately know, that is something that we need to keep in a healthy level during pregnancy.
Yes, our bodies are so amazing. I'm just like, wow. Oh, excuse me. You were see, this is where I was talking about where I should have been drinking my water and it spilled everywhere. So my apologies. I was gonna say that what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. But anyways, I was going to go ahead and mention as well as far as in your research and writing process, were there any other findings or insights about, let's see, I guess because I had a miscarriage, I want to know about that. Like, what are some things that can cause miscarriages?
As I said, could be, well, Toxins a lot of the time. Like we don't live in the world that we evolved in, that our human bodies evolved in this pristine world. And toxins, there's so many studies on each particular toxin that and how it may affect fertility and reproduction and the health of our children too. I highly recommend it, and there's so many tests that you can do to measure various toxins, not just heavy metals, not just mycotoxins, but also there are nutrient deficiencies. And yes, people can eat a perfect diet and very nutrient dense diet, but based on their genetics and based on the soil quality that might be depleted, it's really good to know your genetics so that you can know where your weak links are and support them. And so everybody hears about folic acid being essential for pregnancy, but about 50% of the population has a genetic variant called MTHFR that doesn't allow your body to convert doesn't allow your body to convert folic acid into the form that the body needs, called methylfolate. And so you can be taking folic acid, but it's not metabolizing. And so the folic acid can build up, which studies show that has its own set of problems. So then you could be deficient in the methylfolate and excess in the folic acid. That doesn't necessarily mean that I recommend just going and taking a high dose of methylfolate. I talk all about that in my book, how that can backfire, and you want to do that really, really slow and low. Another really important nutrient, I think even more important, or just as important, is choline. Choline is just not talked about, but it is so important for, especially in the first trimester, for the baby's nervous system and brain to be forming. And acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. It's the most abundant neurotransmitter in our body. And so that's made from choline. And choline helps to drive our methylation pathway, which MTHFR is part of. And so I even say in my book that choline needs some time on the mic. Everybody's focusing on methylfolate and MTHFR, but I really think that choline is important too. But it's, and I state that, like, it's not just a single magic bullet nutrient. You can't, that's just like putting one nutrient into a soil and hoping that that's going to make your garden flourish. And maybe in some rare instances that is exactly what was needed, but it's usually multifactorial, and it's not something just as, oh, well, I'm just going to start eating more of this food, or I'm going to just take this nutrient. It's everything working together.
Right. And you also have a listener's gift as well. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Oh, in my opinion, so I almost titled my book kind of jokingly, MTHFR is a gateway gene, because it's the gene that people first learn about usually. And it is, it opens people's minds up to the concept that our genes influence our health, and our health is influenced by our genes. But my freebie that I wanted to offer the world was what I consider to be my big three most important genes to start with. And PEMT, which is the gene that produces choline, is one of those genes. Now, it's interesting. So choline is, people think about egg yolks. That's a primary source. Choline is what is considered a conditionally essential nutrient, which means our body makes some of it, but we need to get the rest from diet. And so knowing your genes can see what your predisposition is for creating it. The PEMT gene is the only gene that makes choline. And so if you're really variated there, then you might need way more choline than the whole USDA says, or the FDA says you need, this many milligrams, and it's 100% of your RDA or RDI. But that whole thing on any food label with the percentage is 100% is the amount that is shown to prevent diseases of deficiency. That is not the optimal amount that our bodies need. And while they do take into consideration whether you're male or female, and whether you're a child or whether you're pregnant, it really doesn't take in your genetic variability. And so that's why knowing your genes and working with somebody that is well versed in understanding what that means and interpreting your genes is really going to help you to save time, money, and heartache, because you're not just taking supplements willy-nilly, or or if you had a bad reaction to something, it can help you to understand why.
Wow. Yeah, it's more like tailored towards your own individual person as a being, as a person.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, how can our listeners who want more depth information or understanding get their hands on your book?
It is front and center right on my website, jaclyndowns.com, JACLYNDOWNS. And I often will read some pages from my book, or I will post client testimonials on my Instagram page, which is Functional Fertility Solutions.
Wonderful. And as we wrap up, is there one message or takeaway you'd like to leave with the audience in regarding fertility and functional medicine?
It can be very, very overwhelming to learn all of the things that you should be doing or taking or avoiding or buying or not buying. And I like to tell my clients to practice a this is better than that approach, and just what can I do today that was healthier than yesterday? So that way it's not like, oh my goodness, I need to go and throw out all the cleaners under my sink and go buy all natural ones. Like, no, next time you need one, just improve the product. Or next time you need a new mascara, get a natural mascara, that kind of stuff. Or, if you can buy something that's organic, it's going to have less pesticides, which are going to be in our bodies that our liver has to produce and may pass on to our baby. So you don't have to buy everything 100% organic, but what you have available and what you have funds for, slowly make those shifts, because it's the small, consistent changes that are going to end up leading to the big change down the road.
Absolutely. And I love that. Thank you so much for sharing such good information. Like, I love it. And you're going to help so many women. And so thank you so much for being on my show today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.